Okay, so we're going to read Hoot chapter 20. This is the second to last chapter of the book, so we get to see what Roy and Mullet Fingers really try to do to save these owls. Chapter 20. A smaller limousine delivered the Coconut Grove Mayor, Councilman Bruce Grandy, and the Chamber of Commerce president to the construction site. A satellite truck from Naples television station came next, followed by a newspaper photographer. City workers tied red, blue, and white streamers to the fence and hung hand-lettered banner that said, "Welcome, Mother Paula." At 10 minutes to noon, Roy and Beatrice arrived. This time she rode on the handlebars and he pedaled. The camera stowed safely in his backpack. They were startled to see that they weren't the only ones that showed up. The freckle-faced boy, the redhead girl, and at least half of Mr. Ryan's history class were already there, along with a bunch of parents. "What in the world did you say these kids yesterday?" Beatrice promised. "Did you promise them free flapjacks or something?" "I just talked about the owls, that's all," Roy said. He got another pleasant surprise when a van from Trace Middle School athletic department rolled up and Beatrice's soccer teammates piled out, some of them carrying posters. Roy grinned at Beatrice, who shrugged as if it was no big deal. They scanned the growing crowd but saw no sign of her runaway stepbrother. There was no sign of the owls either, which didn't surprise Roy. With so much noise and human commotion, the birds would most likely stand their ground where it was dark and safe. Roy knew that's what the pancake people were betting on, that the owls would be too frightened to venture out. At 12:15, the door of the construction trailer swung open. First to emerge was a policeman, who Roy recognized as Officer Delinko. Then the bald-headed construction foreman with the rotten temper. And then a snooty-looking guy with silver hair and dorky glasses. The last to come out was the woman who played Mother Paula on TV commercials. She wore a shiny gray wig, wire-rimmed glasses, and a calico apron. A few people clapped in recognition, and she waved half-heartedly. A group marched to a rectangular clearing that had been roped off at the center of the construction site. A megaphone was handed to the silvery-haired guy, who said his name was Chuck E. Muckle, a vice president from Mother Paula's company headquarters. He really thought he was a hot shot, Roy could tell. Ignoring the foreman and the police officer, Mr. Muckle proceeded with great enthusiasm to introduce some local big shots: the mayor, a city councilman, and the head of the Chamber of Commerce. "I can't tell you how proud and delighted we are to make Coconut Grove the home of our 469th family-style restaurant," Mr. Muckle said. "Mr. Mayor, Councilman Grandy, and all of you terrific folks who have come out in this gorgeous Florida day, I'm here to promise you that Mother Paula will be a good citizen, a good friend, and a good neighbor to everyone." "Unless you're an owl," Roy said. Muckle didn't hear it. Saluting to the gathering students, he said, "I am truly excited to see so many of our fine young people here today. This is a historic moment for our town, your town, I should say, and we're happy to take a short break from your classes to celebrate with us." He paused and manufactured a chuckle. "Anyway, I expect I'll be seeing most of you again once the restaurant opens and Mother Paula's kitchen is busy. Hey everyone, who likes licorice oatmeal pancakes?" It was an awkward moment. Only the mayor and Councilman Grandy's raised their hands. The girls' soccer teammates held their homemade signs with a blank side facing out as they waited for directions from Beatrice. Mr. Muckles snickered nervously. "Mother Paula, dearest, I think it's time. Shall we do the deed?" They all posed side by side, the company VP and the mayor, Mother Paula, Councilman Grandy, and the boss of the Chamber of Commerce, for the television crew and the news photographer. Gold-painted shovels were handed out. On Mr. Muckles' signal, all the dignitaries smiled, leaned over, and dug up a scoopful of sand. On cue, a smattering of city employees and the crowd cheered and applauded. It was the most bogus thing Roy had ever seen. He couldn't believe that anybody would put it on TV or a newspaper. "These people," Beatrice said, "need a life." As soon as the photo pose ended, Mr. Muckle tossed down his gold shovel and snatched up a big megaphone. "Before the bulldozers and backhoes get rolling," he said, "Mother Paula herself wants to say a few words." Mother Paula didn't look overjoyed to have the microphone shoved into her hand. "You've got a real nice town," she said. "I'll see you next spring at the grand opening." "Oh, no, you won't." This time the words came out of Roy's mouth as a shout, and nobody was more stunned than he. A tremor rippled through the audience, and Beatrice edged closer, half expecting someone to come after him. The Mother Paula's actress seemed miffed. Peering into the crowd, she said, "Who said that?" Roy found himself raising his arm. "I did, Mother Paula," he called out. "If you hurt a single one of our owls, I'm not eating any more of your stupid pancakes." "What are you talking about? What owls?" Chuck Muckle lunged for the megaphone, but Mother Paula threw an elbow and caught him squarely in the gut. "Back up, back off, Chucky Cheeseball," she huffed. "Go on, check it on for yourself," Roy said, gesturing around. "Wherever you see one of those holes, there's an owl den underneath. That's where they build their nests and lay their eggs. It's their home." Mr. Muckle's cheeks turned purple. The mayor looked lost. Councilman Grandy looked like he was about to faint, and the Chamber of Commerce guy looked like he'd swallowed a bar of soap. By now, the parents in the crowd were talking loudly and pointing at the den holes. A few of the school kids started chanting in support of Roy, and Beatrice's soccer teammates began waving their hand-lettered signs. One said, "Mother Paula doesn't give a hoot about owls." Another said, "Bird killers go home." A third sign said, "Save the owls, bury the buttermilks." As the news photographer snapped pictures of the protesters, Mother Paula pleaded, "I don't want to hurt any of the owls. Really, I wouldn't hurt a flea." Chuck Muckle finally recaptured the megaphone and said, "Young fellow, you better get your facts straight before making such outlandish and slanderous charges. There are no owls here. Those burrows have been abandoned for years." "Yeah," Roy said, reaching into his backpack and whipped out his mother's camera. "I've got proof right here." The kids in the crowd hooted and hurrahed. Chuck Muckle's face went gray and slack. He held out his hands and lurched towards Roy. "Let me see that." Scooting out of reach, Roy switched on the digital camera and held his breath. He had no idea what he was about to say. He pressed the button to display the first photograph that Mullet Fingers had taken. The instant the photo was blurred and crooked, and it appeared in the viewfinder. He knew he was in trouble. It was the picture of a finger. Anxiously, he clicked to the second frame. What he saw was no less discouraging, a dirty bare foot. It appeared to be a boy's foot, and Roy knew whose it was. Beatrice's stepbrother had many special talents, but nature photography obviously was not one of them. In desperation, Roy touched the button once more, and a third picture clicked into view. This time, there was definitely something other than a human body, a distant feathery form unevenly illuminated by the camera's flash. "Here," Roy said, "look." Chuck Muckle snatched the camera from him and examined the photo for about 3 seconds before laughing. "What's that supposed to be?" "It's an owl," Roy said. And it was an owl, Roy was certain. Unfortunately, the bird must have swiveled his head just as Mullet Fingers snapped the picture. "Looks more like a lump of mud to me," Chuck Muckle said. He raised the camera so that those in front of the audience could see the viewfinder. "Boy's got quite an imagination, does he? If that's an owl, then I'm a bald eagle." "But it is an owl," Roy insisted, "and that picture was taken right here on the property last night." "Prove it," Chuck Muckle gloated. Roy had no response. He couldn't prove a thing. His mom's camera was passed around the fringes of the crowd, and by the time it got back to Roy, he knew that most people couldn't even tell it was a bird in the photograph. Even Beatrice wasn't sure, turning the viewfinder sideways and upside down as she tried in vain to identify a telltale part of the owl anatomy. Roy was crushed. The pictures taken by his stepbrother were useless. The authorities in charge of protecting the burrowing owls would never block a construction site based on such fuzzy evidence. "Thank you very much for coming," Mr. Muckle said to the crowd, "and thanks for your patience during this rather inconsiderate delay. We'll see all you pancake lovers next spring for a big hearty breakfast. In the meantime, this event is now officially over." The kids from Trace Middle School stirred restlessly and looked towards Beatrice and Roy, who no longer had much of a plan. Roy could feel his shoulders sagging in defeat, while Beatrice's face became a mask of resignation. Then a young voice rose up. "Wait, it ain't over. Not by a mile, it ain't." This time it wasn't Roy. "Uh-oh," said Beatrice, lifting her eyes. A girl in the rear of the crowd let out a shriek, and everybody wheeled to look. At first glance, the object on the ground could have been mistaken for a kickball, but it was actually a boy's head. His matted hair was blonde, and his face was caramel brown, and his eyes were wide and unblinking. A kite string led from his pursed lips to the handle of a large tin bucket a few miles away. The big shots came hurrying out of the crowd with Beatrice and Loy on their heels. They all stopped to gape at the head in the ground. "What now?" moaned the construction foreman. Chuck Muckle thundered. "Is this somebody's sick idea of a joke? Good heavens, is he dead?" But the boy wasn't the least bit dead. He smiled at his stepsister and winked at Roy. Somehow he'd fit his entire skinny body in the opening of an owl burrow, so that only his head stuck out. "Yo, Mother Paula," he said. The actress stepped forward hesitantly. Her wig looked slightly crooked, and her makeup was beginning to melt from the humidity. "What is it?" she said uneasily. "You bury these birds, Mullet Fingers, you gotta bury me too." "But no, I love birds. I love all birds." "Officer Jelinko, where are you?" Chuck Muckle motioned for the policeman to come forward. "Arrest this guy right now." "For what?" "Trespassing, obviously. But your company advertised this event as open to the public. If I arrest the boy, I'd have to arrest everyone on the property." Roy watched in vain as Mr. Muckle's neck swelled up and began to pulse like a garden hose. "I'll be speaking to Chief Deacon about you first thing in the morning," Mr. Muckle hissed under his breath at the patrolman. "That gives you a whole night to work on your sorry excuse for a resume." Now he turned his withering gaze on the foreman. "Mr. Brannett, please uproot this stringy weed." "Wouldn't try that," Beatrice's stepbrother warned through clenched jaws. "And why not?" The boy smiled. "Roy, do me a favor and check what's in the bucket." Roy was happy to oblige the boy. "What do you see?" the boy asked. "Cottonmouth moccasins," Roy replied. "How many?" 9 or 10. "They look happy, Roy?" "No, not really." "What do you think's going to happen if I tip that thing over?" With his tongue, Mullet Fingers displayed that the string was connected to him to the bucket. Somebody'd get hurt pretty bad, Roy said, playing along. He had been mildly surprised, though relieved, to see that the reptiles in the bucket were made of rubber. Mr. Muckles stewed. This is ridiculous, Brannett. Do what I told you. Get that kid out of my sight. Foreman backed away. Not me. I don't care for snakes. Really? Then you're fired. Once again, the vice president turned to confront Officer Delinko. Make yourself useful. Shoot the things. No, sir, not around these people. Too dangerous. The policeman approached the boy and dropped to one knee. How'd you get in there? He asked. Hopped the fence last night and then I hid under a backhoe. He walked right by me about 5 times. You're the one who painted my patrol car? No comment. And ran away from the hospital? Double no comment, the boy said. And hung your green shirt on my antenna? Man, you don't understand. These owls got no chance against these machines. I do understand. I honestly do, Officer Delinko said. One more question. You serious about cottonmouths? Serious as a heart attack. Can I have a look in the bucket? The boy's eyes flickered. It's your funeral, he said. Roy whispered to Beatrice. We gotta do something. Those snakes aren't real. Oh, great. As the policeman approached the tin bucket, Beatrice shouted, Don't do it. You might get bit. Officer Delinko peeked over the rim to see what peeked over the rim to what seemed like an eternity. Shigs up, Roy thought glumly. No way he didn't notice their fake. Yet the patrolman didn't say a word as he backed away. Well, Mr. Muckle demanded, what do we do? Kids for real. If I were you, I'd negotiate, said Officer Delinko. Ha! I don't negotiate with juvenile delinquents. With a snarl, Chuck Muckle snatched the gold-painted shovel from Councilman Grandy's hands and charged towards the bucket. Don't, hollered the boy in the owl hole, spitting the string. But the man from Mother Paula's was unstoppable. With a wild swing of the shovel, he knocked over the bucket and commenced flailing and hacking up the snakes in a blind, slobbering fury. He didn't stop until they were in pieces, little rubber pieces. Exhausted, Chuck Muckle leaned over and squinted at the mutilated toy snakes. His expression reflected both disbelief and humiliation. What in the world? He wheezed. During the violent attack on the cotton mills, the crowd oohed and awed. Now the only sounds were from the click-click of the news photographer's camera and the panting of Mother Paula's vice president. Hey, them snakes fake, Curly piped up. They ain't even real. Roy leaned towards Beatrice and whispered, Another Einstein. Chuck Muckle pivoted in slow motion. He pointed to the blade of the shovel at the boy in the hole. You, he bellowed, stalking forward. Roy jumped in front of him. Get out of my way, kid. I don't have any more time for your nonsense. Move it now. It was clear that the Mother Paula's big shot had totally lost his cool and possibly his marbles. What are you doing? Roy asked, knowing he probably wouldn't get a calm, patient answer. I said, get out of my way. I'm going to dig that little twerp out of the ground myself. Beatrice darted forward and stood next to Roy, taking his right hand. An anxious murmur swept through the crowd. Oh, that's cute, real cute, just like Romeo and Juliet, Chuck Muckle taunted. He dropped his voice and said, Game over, kiddies. On the count of 3, I'm going to start using the shovel. Or better yet, how about I get over there and crank up the bulldozer? The foreman scowled. I thought you said I was fired. Out of nowhere, somebody grabbed Roy's left hand. It was Garrett, his skateboard tucked under one arm. 3 of his skateboarding homies were lined up next to him. What are you doing? Roy said. Skipping school. But dude, this looks like way more fun. Roy turned to see that Beatrice had been joined by the entire soccer team, linking arms in a silent chain. They were tall, strong girls who weren't the least bit intimidated by Chuck Muckle's blustering threats. Chuck Muckle realized it too. Stop this foolishness right now. No need for an ugly mob scene. Roy watched in wonderment as more and more of the kids slipped out of the crowd and began joining hands, forming a human barricade around Beatrice's stepbrother. None of the parents made a move to stop them. The TV cameraman announced that the demonstration was being broadcasted live on the noon news, while the photographer from the paper swooped in for a close-up of Mr. Muckle, looking drained, defeated, and suddenly very old. He braced himself in the ceremonial shovel as if it were a cane. Didn't any of you people hear me? He rasped. This event is over. Done. You can all go home now. The mayor, Councilman Granny, and the man from the Chamber of Commerce stealthily retreated to their limousines, while Lloyd Brannett plodded off to his trailer in search of a cold beer. Officer Delinko leaned against the fence, writing up a report. Roy was in an eerie yet tranquil daze. Some girls started singing a famous old folk song called This Land Is Your Land. It was Beatrice, of all people, and her voice was surprisingly lovely and soft. Before long, the other kids were singing along too. Roy shut his eyes and felt like he was floating on a sunny slope of a cloud. Excuse me, hotshot, got room for one more? Roy blinked and opened his eyes and broke into a grin. Yes, ma'am. Mother Paula stepped between him and Garrett to join the circle. Her voice was gravelly, but she could carry a tune just fine. The demonstration went on for another hour. 2 other TV TV crew showed up, along with a couple extra Coconut Grove police cruisers, summoned by Officer Delenko. Chuck Muckle extorted the news arrived lawmen to arrest the protesters for trespassing, truancy, and disturbing the peace. The suggestion was firmly rejected, a sergeant informing Mr. Muckle that handcuffing a bunch of middle school kids wouldn't be good for public safety department's image. The situation remained fairly stable until a flamboyant arrival of Lana Leap, who had spotted her son on the TV news. She was all dressed up like she'd been invited to a party, and she wasn't the least bit shy about sticking her nose in front of the cameras. Roy overheard her tell a reporter how proud she was of her boy, risking his freedom to save the helpless owls. "He's my great, brave little champion," Lona crowned obnoxiously. With a phony squeal of affection, she charged towards the wall of humanity that encircled her son. Beatrice ordered everyone to lock arms, blocking Lona's path. There was one hairy moment when Lona and her stepdaughter stood glowering at each other, eye to eye, as if they were about to tangle. Garrett broke off the standoff with a phenomenal fake fart that sent Lona reeling backwards in horror. Roy nudged Beatrice. "Look up there." Overhead, a small, dusky-colored owl was flying in a marvelous, daring corkscrew. Roy and Beatrice watched in delight as it banked lower and lower, finishing with a radical nosedive towards the burrow at the center of the circle. Everyone whirled to see where the bird had landed. All of a sudden, the singing stopped. There was Mullet Fingers, trying not to giggle. The daredevil owl perched calmly on the crown of his head. "Don't worry, little guy," the boy said. "You're safe for now." So let's pull up the questions. Chapter 20 questions. What did Mullet Fingers do at the construction site? And 2, how are the students choosing to protest? Thanks for reading with me today.